The police arrived at my mother-in-law's house 18 minutes after I made the call. I watched from my car as two officers walked up her driveway. My daughter sat beside me, eating apple slices, completely unaware that the AirTag I had just handed back to her grandmother had been tracking her every movement for 6 weeks. Some people in my family still think I went too far. I need you to tell me. I had known about the AirTag for 5 weeks and 4 days. The notification popped up on my phone while I was driving home from my daughter's soccer practice. AirTag detected near you. I pulled over immediately, heart hammering, and searched her backpack. Found it tucked inside the inner lining of the front pocket, sewn in with careful stitches that matched the original seam perfectly. My hands shook as I held it, not from fear. From rage so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. I did not confront my mother-in-law that day. I did not confront her the next day or the day after that. I smiled at school pickup. I invited her to my daughter's piano recital. I sent her photos of the park visit she had already watched happen in real time on her phone. And every single time she hugged my daughter goodbye, patted her backpack, asked about her day with that sweet grandmotherly concern, I documented it. Time stamps, locations, screenshots of every place that AirTag had tracked my child. My lawyer told me to let it continue. Let her think she is getting away with it, Patricia said. We need the pattern, so I did. Let me tell you how we got here. My mother-in-law's name is Diane. She has silver hair that she gets colored every 3 weeks at a salon that costs more than most people's car payments. She wears St. John knit suits to family dinners. She introduced me to people as my son's wife for the first 8 years of my marriage, never by my name. When I was pregnant, she told me I was glowing, then asked if I had considered a smaller baby shower because people do not need to make such a fuss. At the hospital, after 31 hours of labor, she walked into my room and said, "Well, you certainly took your time." I should have known then. My husband, her son, died 4 years ago. Car accident. Black ice. Gone in seconds on a Tuesday morning in February. Diane arrived at my house 6 hours after I got the call from the police. She did not hug me. She walked past me into the nursery where my daughter was sleeping and stood there for 20 minutes just watching her breathe. When she came back out, she said, "You are going to need help." She was not wrong. I was 31 years old, suddenly widowed with a 4-year-old daughter and a job in medical device sales that required travel I could no longer manage. Diane started showing up every morning. She made breakfast. She drove my daughter to preschool. She organized the funeral, fielded the calls, managed the flowers and the food, and all the terrible logistics of death. I was drowning and she threw me a rope. I did not see the anchor tied to the other end. The undermining started small. Comments about my parenting that felt like advice but landed like criticism. "Are you sure you want her watching that much television? I would not let her have sugar before bed, but you know best. She seems tired. Are you getting her to bed on time?" I told myself she was grieving too. She had lost her only son. I could handle some pointed questions about bedtimes. Then it escalated. She began making decisions without asking me, signed my daughter up for ballet classes I had not approved, changed her pediatrician appointment because the other time worked better for my schedule. Bought her a new winter coat because the one you picked was not warm enough. When I confronted her, gently, carefully, she cried. Actual tears. She said she was just trying to help, that she could not lose her granddaughter too, that she was sorry if she overstepped, but she only wanted what was best. My daughter hugged her and said, "It's okay, Grandma." I felt like the villain. I started setting boundaries, small ones. "Please ask me before you schedule anything. I appreciate your input, but I will choose her doctor. I am her mother." Diane smiled and nodded and said, of course, she understood. Then she did exactly what she wanted anyway. My sister told me to cut her off. "She is manipulating you," she said over coffee while my daughter played at the table beside us. "You do not owe her access just because she is grieving." But my daughter loved her grandmother. Diane was the one who showed up for school events, who remembered every dance recital, who bought the elaborate birthday presents and made the special cookies. I was working 60-hour weeks trying to keep us afloat financially. Diane filled the gaps. I did not know she was also taking notes. The professional underestimation ran parallel to the personal. My family had always treated my career like a temporary phase, something I did until I had children or married someone who earned enough that I would not need to. My mother asked when I was going to settle down and find something less stressful, approximately once a month. My brother-in-law made jokes about sales quotas and pushy salespeople. Diane once told me at a family dinner in front of 12 people that it was sweet I was trying to keep busy after my husband's death, but that I should not feel pressured to work so hard. "You have his life insurance," she said. "You are provided for." I signed a $470,000 contract the next morning. I did not mention it at the next family gathering. I smiled and nodded when Diane asked if I had thought about going part-time. The pattern continued for years. Family dinners, where my career was treated like a hobby. Holidays where Diane made comments about working mothers and quality time. My daughter's teacher conferences where Diane showed up uninvited and introduced herself as the primary caregiver. I let it slide. I was building something, and they had no idea what it was. By the time my daughter turned 7, I was the top sales representative in my region. I had been promoted twice. I managed a team of 9 people. My base salary was $230,000, not counting bonuses. I owned my house outright, had paid off every debt my husband left behind, and had started a college fund that would cover 4 years at any university in the country. My family thought I was scraping by on life insurance and commission checks. I never corrected them. My mother told me I should be realistic about my daughter's future. "You cannot give her everything," she said. "It is better to teach her to be grateful for what she has." I had just transferred $80,000 into my daughter's education trust. I nodded and said she was probably right. My brother asked me if I needed money for Christmas presents. I had a 6-month emergency fund that could cover a year of expenses. I thanked him and said I was managing fine. Diane told me I should consider moving into something smaller, more affordable. "The house is so big for just the 2 of you," she said. "And the upkeep must be exhausting." I had refinanced at a lower rate and was considering buying a rental property. I told her I would think about it. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, you already know what that silence feels like. The AirTag was different. That was not underestimation. That was violation. I found it on a Thursday in October. My daughter had been complaining that her backpack felt heavy, kept pulling at the straps. I thought maybe she was carrying too many books. I emptied it that night after she went to bed, and that is when my phone buzzed. "AirTag detected near you." I stared at the notification for a full minute before I started searching. The stitching was professional. Whoever sewed it in knew what they were doing. The AirTag sat in a small fabric pocket, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I pulled it out and held it under the kitchen light. It was pink, my daughter's favorite color. I checked the location history on my phone, 6 weeks of data. Every place my daughter had been, Diane had known, the park on Saturdays. Her friend Emma's house for playdates. The pediatrician last month when she had strep throat. The library. The ice cream shop. School pickup every single day. Diane had been tracking my child like she was a package in the mail. My first instinct was to drive to her house immediately and shove the AirTag down her throat. My second instinct was to call the police. My third instinct, the one I listened to, was to call Patricia Reyes, the attorney who had handled my husband's estate and had been quietly helping me with other matters ever since. Patricia answered on the second ring. I told her what I found. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Do not remove it yet. Leave it exactly where it is. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" I went. Patricia had already printed out information about AirTag stalking laws, harassment statutes, and grandparent rights documentation. "She is building a case," Patricia said. "Whether she knows it or not, this is evidence gathering. She thinks you are an unfit mother. She is trying to prove it." The words hit me like a fist. "She wants custody." "I do not know what she wants," Patricia said carefully, "but I know what this looks like, and I know you need to protect yourself and your daughter. So here is what we are going to do." We built a case of our own. I left the AirTag in the backpack. I went about my life exactly as I had before, except now I documented everything. Every time Diane asked about my daughter's schedule, I recorded it. Every comment she made about my parenting, I wrote it down with the date and time. Every decision she tried to make without my permission, I noted it. Patricia told me to let the tracking continue, to let Diane feel confident, to let her believe she had the upper hand. "She is watching you," Patricia said. "So let her watch you being an excellent mother." I did. I took my daughter to every activity, every appointment, every playdate. I made her balanced meals. I read to her every night. I helped with homework. I limited screen time. I was present and engaged and attentive, and somewhere in another house, Diane was watching it all happen on a screen and probably twisting it into something sinister in her mind. The hard part was not the performance. The hard part was the betrayal. This woman had held my hand at my husband's funeral. She had been there when I was falling apart. And now she was tracking my child like a criminal, gathering evidence for some phantom custody battle I had not even known was coming. 5 weeks after I found the AirTag, Diane made her move. She called me on a Sunday evening. My daughter was in the bath. Diane's voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk about your schedule," she said. "I am concerned about how much time you're spending at work. I think it would be better for everyone if I took a more active role in raising her. Perhaps she could stay with me during the week. You could have weekends." My blood went cold. "No, I am not asking," Diane said. "I am telling you what I think is best. You are overwhelmed. You are working too much. She needs stability. She has stability with me." Her mother, "You are not thinking clearly," Diane said, and her voice had that sharp edge I had heard before, the one that came out when she was not getting her way. "I have been documenting my concerns. If you are not willing to work with me voluntarily, I will have to take other steps." I hung up. Then I called Patricia. "She just threatened me," I said. My hands were shaking. "She wants custody. She said she has been documenting concerns." "Good," Patricia said. "Now we move." Everything I had built was about to be tested in front of 43 people who had absolutely no idea it existed. Patricia had everything mapped out within 72 hours. We met at her office on a Wednesday morning while my daughter was at school. She spread documents across her conference table like she was planning a military operation. "Here is what we know," she began. "Diane has been tracking your daughter for 6 weeks. She made a verbal threat regarding custody. She has likely been documenting what she perceives as evidence of neglect or unfitness. What she does not know is that you have been documenting her boundary violations for 4 years." I had brought everything. Emails where Diane changed appointments without asking. Text messages where she made parenting decisions independently. Photos of the ballet enrollment form she forged my signature on. A timeline of every overstepped boundary, every dismissive comment, every time she introduced herself as the primary caregiver. Patricia photographed each page methodically. "Now let me show you what else we have," she continued. She opened a folder I had never seen before. Inside were financial documents, property records, business filings, my business filings. The consulting firm I had started 18 months ago, run quietly from my home office while my family thought I was still doing medical device sales. I was still doing sales. I just also happened to own the company now. "Your revenue last year was $1.3 million, Patricia noted. "You employ 6 people. You own your home and 2 rental properties. You have $412,000 in liquid assets, and your daughter's education trust is fully funded through graduate school. Diane thinks you are barely surviving on life insurance." "I know. The question is why you let her think that." I stared at the documents. Numbers I had built in silence, piece by piece, deal by deal. Because the moment they knew I was successful, they would want a piece of it, or they would find a way to diminish it, or they would say I was neglecting my daughter to build a business. I couldn't win either way, so I just stopped playing. Patricia nodded slowly. "That ends now. We are going to show them exactly what you built, but more importantly, we are going to show them what Diane did. The tracking, the boundary violations, the custody threat, all of it." "How?" "Family dinner," she replied. "You are going to invite everyone. Parents, siblings, Diane, you are going to hand her the backpack with the AirTag still inside, and you are going to let her explain to the entire family why she put a tracking device on an 8-year-old child." My stomach twisted. "She'll deny it." "She will try, but we will have proof, screenshots, location data, timeline, everything documented and ready. And then, when she is finished digging her hole, you are going to show them who you actually are." I left Patricia's office with a 3-inch binder of evidence and a plan that terrified me. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. I had to keep smiling at Diane, keep letting her track my daughter, keep pretending I had no idea what was happening. Every school pickup felt like a performance. Every grocery store run felt staged. I knew she was watching the little blue dot on her phone, probably taking notes, building her case about my inadequate parenting. My daughter asked why Grandma was texting so much. "She just wants to make sure we are okay," I told her. It was not entirely a lie. 2 weeks before the planned dinner, my mother called. "Your father and I are concerned," she opened with. "No hello, no pleasantries. Diane mentioned you have been working quite a bit lately. She said you are gone most evenings." I was working, building a proposal for a contract worth $600,000, the largest in my company's history. I had been on video calls until 9 p.m. 3 nights that week. My daughter had been with a babysitter, fed and supervised and perfectly fine, but I could hear what my mother was really asking. "I'm managing," I replied carefully. "Well, we just want to make sure you are not overdoing it. You have to think about what is best for her, not just what is best for your career." The implication hung there. I thought about telling her the truth right then. I thought about explaining that my career was providing my daughter with a stability most children would never have, that I was building generational wealth while they all assumed I was struggling. Instead, I thanked her for her concern and ended the call. Then I opened my laptop and signed the $600,000 contract. The close calls escalated as the dinner approached. My sister stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon, and I had business documents spread across my kitchen table. She glanced at them curiously. "What are you working on?" "Just organizing some paperwork," I answered, sliding the pages into a folder. One of them was a quarterly revenue report. If she had looked closely, she would have seen numbers that did not match the story I had been living. She picked up her coffee. "You know, if you ever need help with bills or anything, you can ask. I know it must be hard managing everything alone." The revenue report in my hands showed profits of $347,000 for the previous quarter. I set it down gently. "I appreciate that." "Really?" After she left, I called Patricia. "We need to move faster, they are closing in." "2 more weeks," she assured me. "Everything is almost ready." The second close call happened at my daughter's school. I was picking her up early for a dentist appointment when Diane appeared in the parking lot. She had not mentioned she would be there. She walked straight to my car. "I thought I would surprise her," Diane explained, leaning into my daughter's window. "Take her for ice cream before her appointment." My daughter's face lit up. I could see the AirTag location on Diane's phone if I had wanted to look. She had known exactly where we would be and when. "We really need to get to the dentist," I responded evenly. "But maybe this weekend?" Diane's smile tightened. "You are always so busy, I barely see her anymore." "You see her location every minute of every day," I thought. Out loud, I said, "This weekend, I promise." She stepped back from the car. My daughter waved goodbye. I pulled out of the parking lot and my hands did not shake until we were 3 blocks away. That evening, I met with Marcus Chen, my accountant. He had been helping me structure the business to protect assets in case Diane actually tried to pursue custody. We sat in his office reviewing trust documents and corporate filings. "Everything is separated correctly," Marcus confirmed. "Your personal assets are protected. The business is its own entity. If she tries to claim you are financially unstable or unable to provide, we have documentation proving otherwise. Tax returns, bank statements, property records, all of it clean and clear. And if she tries to use my work schedule against me, we show childcare receipts, babysitter payments, after-school program enrollment. You have accounted for every minute. She has no case." I wanted to believe him, but I knew Diane, she did not need a real case. She needed doubt, sympathy, and family members who already thought I was overwhelmed. The third close call happened 5 days before the dinner. My brother stopped by to drop off a birthday present for my daughter. He came inside, looked around the house, and his gaze landed on my office door. It was open. My dual monitors were visible, spreadsheets clearly displayed. "That is a nice setup," he observed. "I thought you did sales calls from your phone mostly." I had been careless. The office showed equipment worth thousands of dollars, professional lighting for video conferences, a standing desk. The kind of setup someone running a business would have, not someone scraping by on commission. "I upgraded recently," I said, moving to partially close the door. "Makes the work easier." He nodded, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was trying to match what he saw with what he believed about my situation. I changed the subject quickly, asked about his kids, steered him back toward the living room. After he left, I texted Patricia. "I think my brother suspects something." Her response was immediate. "Good, let them wonder. 5 more days." I spent those 5 days preparing in ways my family would never see. I rehearsed what I would say. I printed documentation. I coordinated with Patricia about timing and legal boundaries. I arranged for my daughter to be at a friend's house during the dinner so she would not witness what was about to happen. And I kept that AirTag exactly where Diane had placed it, tracking my child, building her case, believing she held all the power. On the morning of the dinner, Patricia called with final instructions. "Remember, you are not there to win an argument. You are there to present facts. Stay calm, let the evidence speak. And when Diane tries to turn it around on you, which she will, you simply show them the truth. What if they don't believe me? They will believe the documents. Bank statements do not lie." Property records do not lie. Screenshots with timestamps and locations do not lie. You have spent 4 years letting them underestimate you. Tonight, that ends. I picked up my daughter from school that afternoon and drove her to her friend Emma's house. She asked why she could not come to the family dinner. I told her it was going to be boring grown-up talk. She hugged me goodbye, backpack still on her shoulders, AirTag still tucked inside the lining. "I love you," I said, holding her tight. "Love you too, Mom." I watched her run inside Emma's house. Then I drove to my own house, changed into the outfit I had selected, and loaded 3 banker boxes of documentation into my car. Tax returns, property deeds, business incorporation papers, bank statements, corporate filings. 4 years of evidence that I was not who they thought I was. 1 manila folder containing 6 weeks of AirTag location data, screenshots, and a timeline of everywhere Diane had tracked my daughter without my knowledge or consent. Patricia arrived at my house an hour before the dinner. She reviewed everything one final time, checked that I had copies of key documents in the right order, and reminded me to breathe. "You have built something extraordinary," she told me. "Not just the business. You have built a life for your daughter that most people only dream about. Tonight, you get to stop hiding it." We drove separately to the restaurant. I had reserved a private room that seated 20. My parents arrived first, then my siblings and their spouses, then Diane. She wore a navy scent, John's suit, and pearls. She kissed my cheek and asked where her granddaughter was. "At a friend's house," I answered. "This dinner is just for adults." Something flickered across her face. Suspicion, maybe, but she smiled and took her seat at the head of the table. Everyone settled in. My mother asked about work. My brother's wife mentioned a sale at a store I could never afford, or so she thought. Diane sipped her wine and watched me with those sharp eyes that had been watching my daughter's location on a screen for 6 weeks. I waited until everyone had ordered. Then I stood up. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was steady. "There is something I need to discuss with everyone, and I thought it was important to do it in person." My mother looked concerned. My father set down his menu. Diane's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw her hand tight around her wine glass. I reached into my bag and pulled out my daughter's backpack, the small purple one with the unicorn patch she had picked out herself. I walked to Diane's end of the table and set it down in front of her. "You might want to check the front pocket," I said clearly. "I believe there is something in there that belongs to you." Diane stared at the backpack. She did not reach for it. Around the table, confusion rippled through my family. My mother frowned. My sister leaned forward slightly. My father's hand paused halfway to his water glass. "I want to know if you would have said what I said next, because I still think about it." "Go ahead," I continued, my voice clear enough that every person in that room heard every word. "Open the front pocket, the inner lining, you know exactly where it is." Diane's face remained composed, but her fingers stayed locked around her wine glass. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." I stayed standing. "You've known where my daughter is every single day for the past 6 weeks. The park, Emma's house, her dentist appointment on the 14th, the library last Tuesday at 3:15 in the afternoon. You've been watching her, tracking her, following every movement she makes." My brother's wife inhaled sharply. My mother's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. My father finally set down his water glass with a soft clink that seemed deafening in the silence. Diane lifted her chin. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I pulled out my phone, fingers steady as I opened the screenshots. "Because I have 6 weeks of location data that says otherwise. Every place that AirTag has been, I have a timestamp, and they match perfectly with everywhere my daughter went." I turned the phone toward the table. My sister was close enough to see. Her eyes scanned the screen, and I watched her expression change from skeptical to horrified in the span of 3 seconds. "You put a tracker on her." My sister's voice was barely above a whisper. Diane set her wine glass down with deliberate care. "I was concerned. She's my granddaughter. I have a right to know she's safe. You have no right to track an 8-year-old child without her mother's knowledge or consent." Patricia had coached me on staying calm, on not letting emotion crack my voice. I channeled every ounce of that training now. "What you have done is illegal in this state. It's harassment. It's stalking. And you did it to a child." My mother found her voice. "There must be some misunderstanding." "There isn't." I pulled out the printed screenshots, the location timeline, and spread them across the table. 6 weeks of data, organized by date, each entry showing an exact location and timestamp. "I found the AirTag 5 weeks ago. I left it exactly where Diane placed it. I wanted to see how long she would continue, how much evidence she would build, because this wasn't about safety. This was about building a case." Diane's composure finally cracked, just slightly, a tightness around her mouth. You don't understand what you're accusing me of. I understand perfectly. I reached into my bag again. This time I pulled out printed copies of her text messages, the ones where she had questioned my parenting, the emails where she had made decisions without asking, the timeline of boundary violations going back 4 years. You called me 2 weeks ago. You told me I was working too much. You suggested my daughter stay with you during the week. You said if I didn't agree voluntarily, you would take other steps. Do you remember that conversation? The table had gone completely still. Even the server, approaching with water, stopped several feet away and retreated. My father spoke, his voice careful. Diane, did you say that? She's twisting it, Diane replied, but her voice had lost its certainty. I was trying to help. She's overwhelmed. Anyone can see that. I'm not overwhelmed. I laid out another document, my daughter's school records, perfect attendance, excellent grades, teacher comments praising her engagement and happiness. My daughter is thriving. She's healthy, well-adjusted, and cared for. The only person who seems to think otherwise is you. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Why would Diane track her if everything was fine? Because Diane wants custody. The words landed like stones. She has been building a case, documenting what she believes is evidence of my inadequacy as a mother. The tracking was part of it, watching where I took her, how long I was at work, looking for any deviation from what Diane considers acceptable parenting. Diane stood abruptly. That is absurd. I would never. You threatened me with legal action 13 days ago. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the recording app. I had recorded that conversation. Patricia had told me it was legal in our state as long as one party consented. I was one party. Would you like me to play it for everyone? The color drained from Diane's face. Not pale, not white, but the blood left her cheeks in a way that told me she knew exactly what was on that recording. My mother reached for Diane's arm. Maybe we should all calm down. I am calm, I responded. I've been calm for 6 weeks while my daughter was being tracked like a criminal. I've been calm for 4 years while Diane undermined every decision I made, overstepped every boundary I set, and treated me like I was incapable of raising my own child. I am very, very calm. My sister picked up one of the printed screenshots. This shows Emma's address, and the time you dropped her off for the playdate last week. Yes, Diane knew about the playdate. Diane knew about everything, because she was watching. My brother's expression had shifted from defensive to deeply uncomfortable. This is family business. We can work this out privately. This stopped being family business the moment she put a tracking device on my child and threatened me with custody proceedings. I turned back to Diane. You thought I was barely surviving. You thought I was overwhelmed, struggling, unable to provide. You built an entire case on that assumption. Diane's hands gripped the back of her chair. I did what any grandmother would do. I protected her. From what? My voice rose slightly, the first crack in my composure. From a mother who loves her, from a stable home, from someone who has bent over backward to include you in her life despite every single boundary you've violated. From poverty, Diane's voice finally broke too. From watching her mother work herself to death trying to make ends meet. From the instability of a single-parent home where you're gone all the time and she's being raised by babysitters. There it was. The belief system that had driven everything. She genuinely thought I was failing. My father cleared his throat. Diane, that seems extreme. Is it? Diane looked around the table, searching for allies. She works constantly. She's always traveling for sales calls. She can barely afford that house. I've offered to help, offered to provide stability, and she refuses. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask. I pulled out the next set of documents. This was the moment Patricia and I had planned for. You were supposed to believe me when I said we were fine. You were supposed to respect that I am her mother. But since you didn't, let me show you what you actually missed while you were busy tracking my daughter and building your case. I laid out the first document, my business incorporation papers. Date filed 2 years ago. My mother picked it up, confused. What is this? My company. I don't just do medical device sales anymore. I own the company. I pulled out the next document, last year's tax return. Revenue last year was $1.3 million. The table absorbed that in silence, my brother's eyes fixed on the number. My sister's mouth opened slightly, then closed. My father reached for the document, studied it like he was trying to find the error. You own a company? My mother's voice was faint. I do. I employ 6 people. I have contracts with 17 medical facilities across 4 states. I started it 18 months after my husband died. I built it while you all assumed I was barely scraping by. I pulled out another document, property records. I own my house, paid off the mortgage last year. I also own 2 rental properties. Combined value $1.7 million. My sister picked up the property records with trembling fingers. You never said anything. Would you have believed me? I looked at her directly. Or would you have done exactly what you did when I told you I got promoted? Smiled and changed the subject because it was easier than admitting you underestimated me? She didn't answer. I turned back to Diane. You thought my daughter needed rescuing. You thought I was failing her. So let me show you what I've actually provided. I pulled out the trust documentation. My daughter has an education fund that will cover 4 years of undergraduate and 3 years of graduate school at any institution in the country. Fully funded. $378,000 as of last month. Diane sank slowly back into her chair. I have a 6-month emergency fund. I have retirement accounts that will let me stop working at 55 if I choose. I have life insurance that would provide for my daughter until she's 30. I have built financial security that most people only dream about, and I did it while you were watching a little blue dot on your phone and taking notes about how often I work. If you are still here, hit like. I need to know you saw that. My father was the first to speak. His voice was measured, careful. Why didn't you tell us? Because it wasn't safe. I looked around the table. Every time I achieved something, you found a way to diminish it. When I got promoted, you asked if the stress was worth it. When I bought the house, you suggested something smaller. When I mentioned doing well at work, you changed the subject. I learned that success made me a target, so I stopped sharing it. My mother's face had gone through several emotions in rapid succession. Now it settled on something that looked like shame. We thought we were helping. You thought I was helpless. There's a difference. I pulled out more bank statements, investment accounts, proof of every single claim I had made. I didn't need help. I needed you to believe I was capable. Diane certainly didn't believe it. She tracked my child because she was so convinced I was failing that she needed evidence. My brother finally found his voice. The tracking thing is way over the line, but if you were doing this well, why did you let us think otherwise? Because you wanted to think otherwise. The truth of it was bitter. It was easier for all of you to see me as the struggling widow than as someone who had built something substantial. And the moment I stopped fitting that narrative, Diane decided I was unfit and needed to be stopped. Diane's voice was barely audible. I thought I was protecting her. You were protecting your own assumptions. I stood over her now, all the documentation spread across the table like evidence in a trial. You couldn't accept that I was succeeding, so you built a story where I wasn't. You gathered evidence to support that story. You put a tracking device on a child to prove it. And when you had enough, you threatened to take her from me. My sister was reading through the tax returns now, her expression shifting between shock and something else I couldn't quite name. Why keep this secret for so long? Because I knew what would happen the moment you all found out. I gestured at the table, at their faces, at the reality now laid bare. This, exactly this, you would question it. You would find reasons it couldn't be real. You would make it about yourselves instead of accepting that I did this on my own. My father set down the property records. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked at him directly. When I told you I closed my first major contract, you asked if I was sure it was legitimate. When I mentioned buying the house, you suggested I rent instead. Every achievement was met with skepticism or concern. Never congratulations, never pride, so I stopped telling you. The silence stretched. Around us, the restaurant continued its normal operations, but our private room felt suspended in time. My mother spoke quietly. We failed you. Yes, there was no point in softening it. You did. But Diane did worse. She didn't just fail to support me, she actively tried to undermine me, and when that didn't work, she tried to take my daughter. Diane's hands were flat on the table now. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you did. I pulled out the final document, a restraining order already prepared, needing only my signature and filing. You stalked a child. You violated privacy laws. You made threats regarding custody that you had no legal standing to pursue. My attorney has advised me that I have grounds to file charges. Patricia had been sitting quietly in the corner. Now she stood, walked to the table, and placed her business card in front of Diane. I represent her interests and her daughter's interests. If you attempt any further contact without explicit permission, if you continue any surveillance, if you pursue any custody claims, I will file every available charge and civil suit. Are we clear? Diane stared at the card. She didn't pick it up. My brother looked between us. This is extreme. Can't we talk about this as a family? We are talking about it as a family, I replied. Right now, in front of everyone. Because I'm done with private conversations where Diane makes threats and I'm expected to just accept them. Everyone here needs to understand what happened and why it's not acceptable. My sister set down the tax return. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You just have to witness this, all of you. I looked around the table. You all stood by while Diane crossed boundaries. When she changed my daughter's doctor appointment without asking, no one said anything. When she forged my signature on enrollment forms, no one questioned it. When she introduced herself as the primary caregiver at school events, no one corrected her. You let it happen because it was easier than confronting her. My father's face tightened. That's not entirely fair. It's completely fair. Every single one of you saw what was happening and chose not to intervene because family harmony was more important than my autonomy as a parent. You enabled her, and she escalated until she was literally tracking my child with a hidden device. The server appeared at the door, clearly uncertain whether to interrupt. I waved him away. My mother reached for the restraining order. You're really going to file this? That depends entirely on Diane. I turned to face her fully. I will not have my daughter tracked. I will not tolerate surveillance or boundary violations. I will not accept threats regarding custody. If you can agree to those terms and respect them, we can discuss supervised visitation in the future. If you can't, then yes, I'm filing this today. Diane's voice was hollow. She's my granddaughter. Then act like a grandmother, not a stalker. The words were harsh, but they were true. Grandmothers don't track children in secret. They don't threaten custody proceedings. They don't violate trust and privacy and then claim it was done out of love. My sister touched Diane's arm gently. Maybe you should apologize. For what? Diane's defenses were crumbling, but she clung to the remnants. For caring, for trying to ensure she was safe. For putting a tracking device on her without permission, I stated flatly. For stalking her for 6 weeks. For making threats. For violating every boundary I ever set. For assuming I was failing when you had no evidence beyond your own biases. Pick one. The table fell silent again. I could see my family processing, trying to reconcile what they thought they knew with what was now in front of them. Tax returns don't lie. Property records don't lie. Bank statements showing 6-figure balances don't lie. My father finally spoke. I think we owe you an apology too. I'm not looking for apologies right now. I'm looking for acknowledgement. I gathered the documents back into their folders. Acknowledge that you underestimated me. Acknowledge that you enabled Diane's behavior. Acknowledge that the assumptions you made about my life were wrong. My mother's eyes were wet. She didn't cry, but the tears were there. We were wrong. And understand that those assumptions had consequences. I picked up the backpack, removed the AirTag from the lining, and set it in front of Diane. This is what happens when you decide someone is failing without asking if they need help. This is what happens when you trust your biases more than you trust the person standing in front of you. My brother looked at the AirTag like it was something toxic. What do we do now? That's up to Diane. I sat down for the first time since I'd stood to hand her the backpack. She can agree to boundaries, respect them, and rebuild trust slowly. Or she can refuse, and I file the restraining order tomorrow morning. Either way, the tracking stops tonight. Diane stared at the pink AirTag on the table. Her hand moved toward it, then stopped. I thought you needed help. I know you did, you were wrong. I thought she was being neglected. She wasn't. I thought you were working too much, struggling financially, unable to provide stability. I'm not, I haven't been for years. I leaned forward. But instead of asking me, instead of trusting me, you decided to gather evidence to prove your assumptions. You violated my privacy, my daughter's safety, and the law. That's not help. That's control. My sister was crying quietly now. My father's jaw was set in a way I recognized from childhood, the look he got when he was trying to process something that challenged his worldview. My mother kept touching the tax return like she needed to confirm it was real. Patricia spoke from her position near the corner. For the record, everything presented here tonight is documented and filed. The tracking data has been reported to local authorities. They are aware of the situation and are prepared to act if necessary. This is not a negotiation. This is notification of what has already been set in motion. Diane lifted her head. You called the police? Not yet, I clarified. But Patricia filed a report. If you escalate this, if you continue any form of surveillance or harassment, charges will be pressed immediately. This is your one opportunity to walk away and accept supervised boundaries. My brother's wife, who had been silent through most of this, finally spoke. What happens to family dinners, holidays? That depends on whether Diane can respect boundaries, I answered. I'm not cutting everyone off, but I am establishing clear rules. Diane sees my daughter only with my permission in my presence with notice given in advance. No surprises, no showing up unannounced, no tracking, no undermining my parenting decisions. If she can agree to that and follow it, we can rebuild. If not, she doesn't see her at all, Diane's voice cracked. That's not fair. Fair would have been you respecting me as a parent from the beginning. Fair would have been you asking if I needed help instead of assuming I was failing. Fair would have been you not putting a tracking device on my child. I held her gaze. You forfeited fair when you chose surveillance over trust. I had one more thing to say. I stood and pulled out one more folder. This one was thinner. Inside was a single document, notarized and signed 3 days ago. I've also filed paperwork to formalize custody arrangements, I explained. My daughter's legal guardian in the event of my death or incapacitation is now my sister. I looked at my sister, whose eyes widened. I spoke with her attorney yesterday. She's agreed, the paperwork is filed. Diane, you are explicitly excluded from guardianship consideration. My sister's hand went to her mouth. You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now, in front of everyone, so there's no confusion. I turned back to Diane. You will never have legal custody of my daughter. Not through tragedy, not through court proceedings, not through any means. That door is permanently closed. Diane's face crumpled. Not tears, something deeper. The collapse of a plan years in the making. You can't do that. I already did. It's legal. It's binding. It's done. I placed the document on the table. You thought if you proved I was unfit, you could step in. You thought if you documented enough concerns, built enough of a case, you could take her. You were building toward this for years. The tracking was just the final phase. My father picked up the guardianship document, read it slowly, set it down with careful precision. Diane, is that true? Diane didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. You were planning to take her? I was planning to protect her, Diane replied, but the fight had gone out of her voice. From a life of instability. From watching her mother struggle. I'm not struggling. I gathered the documents back into folders. I haven't struggled in years, but you needed me to be struggling. You needed me to be failing, because if I wasn't, then you had no justification for what you were planning. So you built a narrative that suited your goals and you collected evidence to support it. The AirTag was just insurance, final proof before you made your move. Patricia stepped forward. For the record, any custody petition filed by Diane would be immediately challenged. We have documentation of stalking, harassment, boundary violations, and threats. No court would award custody to someone with that record. The guardianship filing was precautionary, but it also sends a clear message. There is no path forward for Diane to gain legal custody. None. My brother looked sick. Jesus Christ, Diane. Don't, Diane's voice rose. Don't act like you all didn't see what I saw. She was gone all the time, working constantly. How was that different from neglect? Because her daughter was cared for, my sister responded quietly. Because working doesn't equal neglect, because she was building something, which you would have seen if you'd asked instead of spying. Diane turned on her. You agreed with me. You said she worked too much. I said she seemed busy. My sister's voice was firm. I never said she was neglecting anyone. And I certainly never suggested tracking her child. My mother set her napkin on the table with trembling hands. I think you should leave, Diane. Diane stared at her. What? You heard me. You need to leave, now. My mother's voice was steady despite the shaking hands. What you did was illegal. What you planned was worse. I won't be part of covering for this. My father nodded. We'll discuss this as a family later, but right now you should go. Diane looked around the table, looking for allies. Finding none, even my brother, who had defended her earlier, was staring at the documents spread across the table with an expression that bordered on disgust. She stood slowly, picked up her purse, left the AirTag on the table. I did this out of love, she stated, one last attempt at justification. No, I replied. You did this out of control. There's a difference. Diane walked out of the private room. Nobody followed her. The silence that remained was different from the silences before. This one felt like air returning after pressure. My sister was the first to speak. I'm sorry for not seeing it, for not saying something sooner. You weren't the one tracking my daughter. No, but I enabled it. We all did. She looked at our parents. We let her overstep because it was easier than confronting her, and because some part of us probably agreed that you needed help. My father cleared his throat. We were wrong, about a lot of things, about your capabilities. About your situation, about what you needed from us. Yes, there was no point in softening it. My mother reached across the table, stopped just short of touching my hand. Can you forgive us? Eventually, maybe, but not today. I started packing up the documents. Today, I need you to understand what happened and why it can never happen again. I need you to respect that I'm capable, that I've been capable, that I don't need rescuing. My brother spoke for the first time in several minutes. The company, the properties, all of it, that's real? All of it. Why hide it? Because you made it clear that success made me threatening. Every achievement was met with skepticism or concern, so I stopped sharing them. I built my life quietly, away from scrutiny, away from judgment. It was safer that way. My sister was still reading through the tax returns. 1.3 million in revenue, that's not small. No, it's not. And you did it while raising a daughter alone. Yes. She looked up at me. That's incredible. Thank you. The words felt foreign. I couldn't remember the last time someone in my family had simply acknowledged an achievement without qualification. Patricia checked her watch. I need to file some paperwork this afternoon. The restraining order is prepared if you decide to proceed. Give me 48 hours, I decided. If Diane contacts me, threatens me, or shows up anywhere near my daughter before then, file immediately. If she stays away, we'll consider supervised visitation terms. Patricia nodded and gathered her materials. She shook hands with my parents, my siblings, then left us to navigate the aftermath. My father looked older somehow, tired. What happens now? Now you decide whether you can respect my boundaries, whether you can accept that I don't need managing or saving, whether you can let me be successful without making it about yourselves. I stood. I'm going to pick up my daughter. She's probably wondering why dinner is taking so long. You all can stay here and process this however you need to. My mother stood as well. Can I see her soon? Call me first, ask permission, respect my answer. If you can do those things, then yes. I picked up my bag. But the days of showing up unannounced, making decisions for me, and treating me like I'm incapable are over, for all of you. I left the restaurant. The night air was cold and clean. My hands had stopped shaking. I had been holding my breath without realizing it. I let it out slowly. Patricia was waiting by my car. You did well in there, did I? You presented facts, you stayed calm, you set boundaries, that's all you can do. She handed me a folder. The restraining order paperwork, just in case. I took it. Thank you for everything. That's what you pay me for. She smiled slightly. Though for the record, I've never had a client who was quite so thoroughly underestimated by their own family. Lucky me, or unlucky them, they missed watching you build something remarkable. She headed to her own car. Call me if anything changes. I drove to Emma's house. My daughter ran out when she saw my car, backpack bouncing on her shoulders. The backpack no longer contained an AirTag. I had removed it in front of Diane and left it on that restaurant table like the violation it was. How was dinner? My daughter asked, buckling in. Educational, I answered. That's a weird answer. It was a weird dinner. I pulled away from the curb. Did you have fun at Emma's? Yeah, we made cookies. Her mom said I could take some home. She held up a container. Can we eat them tonight? Absolutely. We drove home in comfortable silence. She hummed along to the radio, completely unaware that her grandmother had been tracking her movements for 6 weeks. Completely unaware of the confrontation that had just happened. Completely unaware that I had just restructured our entire family dynamic to protect her. That was exactly how it should be. Diane never contacted me during the 48-hour window. She never called, never texted, never showed up unannounced. Patricia confirmed she had left the AirTag at the restaurant. The police report remained on file, but no charges were pressed. 3 months later, my sister told me Diane had moved to Arizona. Something about being closer to her sister. Nobody believed that was the real reason. The real reason was that she couldn't face what she'd done, couldn't face the family who now knew exactly what she'd planned. My parents and I rebuilt slowly. They asked before visiting. They respected my schedule. They stopped making assumptions about my finances or my capabilities. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. My daughter turned 9 last month. Her birthday party was small. Just her closest friends, my sister and her kids, my parents. No Diane. My daughter asked about her once early on. I told her grandma had moved away and needed some space. She accepted that and moved on faster than any adult I knew. The company hit $2 million in revenue this year. I hired 3 more people. Signed contracts that will carry us through the next 18 months. My daughter's college fund is now worth $422,000. The rental properties generate enough income that I could stop working tomorrow if I wanted to. I don't want to, I built this. Not because I had to prove something to my family, though that was satisfying. Not because I needed to escape financial instability, though that mattered. I built it because I could, because I was capable, because no one was going to rescue me or my daughter, so I rescued us myself. My daughter is thriving, straight as, happy, loved, safe. She has no idea her grandmother once tracked her like a fugitive. She has no idea I spent 6 weeks documenting surveillance while pretending everything was normal. She just knows her mom works hard, loves her fiercely, and built a life where she never has to worry about stability. That's enough. I still have the AirTag. Patricia suggested I keep it as evidence in case Diane ever tried anything legal. It sits in my office safe, pink, and small and harmless looking. A reminder of what people will do when they decide you need saving from yourself. I do not miss Diane, I do not hate her, I just do not need her anymore. Neither does my daughter. So did I go too far or not far enough? Tell me in the comments.